Have you ever faced something that felt far too big for you? A problem that towered over you like a giant, leaving you afraid and unsure of what to do? This is not just the story of a boy and a giant. It's the story of how God shows His people that true strength does not come from size, weapons, or power, but from faith. At this time in history, Israel was being led by its first king, Saul. The people had begged for a king to be like other nations, and God allowed it. They wanted a leader to fight their battles and unite them, just as the surrounding kingdoms had. Though God warned them of the hardships a king would bring, they insisted, believing it was the answer to their problems. Saul started strong, but soon he disobeyed God. His pride grew, and he made decisions without seeking God's guidance. Twice he turned from the Lord's command, and the prophet Samuel told him that because he had rejected the word of the Lord, he had rejected him as king. Saul's heart hardened, and he refused to repent, sealing his fate. Though Saul still wore the crown, God had already chosen another, a humble shepherd boy named David. David's heart was pure, and God saw his potential to lead his people with faith and obedience. Samuel had anointed David in secret, but no one else knew. Only David, his father Jesse, and his brothers were present in that quiet moment, unaware of the profound significance of what had just taken place. For now, David tended sheep in Bethlehem, unknown to the nation. His humble life continued, while God's plan for him slowly unfolded. Meanwhile, Israel's old enemies, the Philistines, had grown bold again. The rivalry between the Israelites and the Philistines started long ago, when the Philistines had ruled over Israel. Though there had been times of peace, the conflict between them never fully ended. Their armies marched out against Israel and camped in the valley of Elah. And from their camp stepped a giant, a warrior, who struck fear into every heart. His presence alone was enough to make anyone tremble as he towered over everyone around him, filling the air with dread. Stories of the Olive presents David and Goliath. Every morning the giant stepped forward. His name was Goliath of Gath, over 9 feet tall, clothed in bronze armor heavier than most men could lift. The head of his spear alone weighed as much as a bowling ball. Day after day, for 40 days, Goliath taunted Israel. He challenged them to send a man to fight him, promising that if he lost, the Philistines would become Israel's servants. And day after day, King Saul and his soldiers cowered in fear. Far away in Bethlehem, young David tended his father Jesse's sheep. He was the youngest of 8 sons, often overlooked, but with a heart full of faith in God. While his brothers were strong and experienced in combat, David's strength came from quiet moments in the fields, singing to the Lord and learning to trust him with every challenge. One day, Jesse told David to take roasted grain and bread to his brothers at the battlefield and bring back news of how they were doing. Jesse's voice carried both concern and pride, for his older sons were serving in King Saul's army, standing against the Philistines. So David set out early, leaving the sheep with a keeper. He made sure each sheep was safe before he left. showing the same care and responsibility that marked his heart even in the smallest tasks. He carried the food, unaware that God was guiding his steps toward destiny. Each step on the dusty road seemed ordinary, yet heaven was preparing a moment that would change the course of Israel's history. David reached the battlefield just as Goliath came out with his daily challenge.
"Send me a man to fight, you cowards!"
The ground trembled with the giant's voice, and the clash of armor echoed through the valley. The soldiers trembled in fear. Their shields rattled in their hands, and not one dared to step forward as Goliath's booming voice rolled across the valley. David, full of faith, asked who this uncircumcised Philistine was, daring to defy the armies of the living God. His words, though spoken by a youth, carried a courage that silenced the trembling men around him. His brother Eliab overheard and grew angry, questioning why David had come, suggesting he should be with his sheep instead of meddling with things that didn't concern him. But Eliab's anger came not from wisdom, but from fear and pride, unable to see that God was preparing David for something greater. But David's faith was unshaken. Word of David's words reached Saul, and David was brought before him. Curious and desperate for hope, Saul looked upon the boy, wondering how someone so young could speak with such confidence. Saul looked at the boy and shook his head. He said that David could not go against this Philistine, for he was only a young man, and Goliath had been a warrior since youth. The king's words were heavy with doubt, echoing the fear that had silenced every man in his army. David replied that he had fought lions and bears to protect his sheep, and that the Lord who had delivered him from their paws would deliver him from this Philistine. Saul, astonished, finally told David to go, wishing him the Lord's blessing. Saul tried to give David heavy armor, but David removed it. The weight of the metal slowed him, reminding him that his strength had never come from weapons or armor, but from the God who had always been with him. Instead, he took up his sling and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook. Each stone felt light in his hand. Yet David knew that in God's power, even the smallest things could bring down the mightiest giants. David walked onto the battlefield, a boy with no armor, no sword, only a sling and faith in God. Goliath, taunting David, questioned whether he was a dog for David to come at him with sticks, threatening to feed David's flesh to the birds. His booming laughter echoed through the valley, shaking the hearts of Israel's soldiers. But David's gaze never wavered. David boldly declared that while Goliath came against him with sword and spear, he came against him in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, whom Goliath had defied. He told Goliath that today the Lord would deliver him into David's hand. The words rang out across the valley, silencing even the Philistines for a moment, as faith stood face to face with fear. David then ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Every step he took echoed courage. A shepherd boy charging toward a warrior giant. He reached into his bag, took out a stone, and slung it. The stone flew through the air and struck Goliath on the forehead, causing the giant to fall face down with a crash. The mighty giant was dead. The Philistines fled in terror, their cries echoing through the valley as panic spread among them. The same men who had once roared with confidence now stumbled over each other in fear, realizing their champion was gone. The Israelites shouted in triumph, their voices rising like thunder across the valley. Joy and disbelief filled the air as they surged forward, their fear replaced with faith and courage. And Saul looked on, astonished, as a shepherd boy had brought victory to God's people. In that moment, the mighty king saw that true strength did not rest in armor or power, but in unwavering faith in the Lord. After the defeat of Goliath, David went on to become the greatest king of Israel, uniting the tribes and leading the nation to victory in many battles. Despite the personal struggles and family turmoil he faced, David remained faithful to God, and his legacy paved the way for the coming of the Messiah. On the other hand, King Saul's reign ended in tragedy. Overcome by jealousy and fear, Saul's disobedience led to his downfall, and he took his own life in battle. Though his life ended in despair, his story serves as a warning about the consequences of turning away from God. David's strength was not in weapons, size, or experience. His strength was faith in the living God. As the Israelite soldiers trembled, they saw no way out. The giant, Goliath, seemed insurmountable. His presence alone sent a wave of fear that paralyzed them, making them believe that victory was impossible. The people of Israel felt hopeless. How could they fight such a beast? What chance did they have against someone so mighty, so powerful? David was the least likely hero. He was young, small, overlooked, and unassuming. His brothers, seasoned soldiers, had been too scared to face Goliath. Yet David, a boy who spent his days alone with sheep, was the one chosen by God to bring victory. Now let me ask you this: what giant are you facing today? Maybe you're not standing on a battlefield with a giant towering before you, but we all have giants in our lives. Giants can take many forms. They can be fear that paralyzes you from moving forward, or they could be doubts that scream louder than your faith, making you question everything. Maybe it's a trial you're going through, whether it's a tough relationship, financial difficulties, or an illness. Maybe the giant is something you've been fighting for years, something that seems so big that you feel it will never end. The question is, how do we face these giants? Like the Israelites, sometimes we look at our problems and feel like there's no hope. We think, this is too big, I can't do this, this is beyond me, and we freeze in fear. We let the size of the problem define us. But here's the thing: regardless of the size of the trials or the temptation we face, God always has a plan in store. The bigger the giant, the bigger the opportunity for God to show His power. And God's plan is often much bigger than we can see in the moment. David didn't see a giant. He saw an opportunity to honor God and show the world that God fights for those who trust in Him. You see, David's faith wasn't in his sling or his stone. It was in God. And that faith moved mountains. The giant you're facing today may seem undefeatable, but it is nothing compared to the God who is fighting for you. Like David, You may feel under-equipped, unqualified, or too small, but you are not fighting alone. And God is not intimidated by the size of your problems. He has a plan, and it is greater than any giant you face. If you look at your struggles through the eyes of faith, you'll see that every battle you face is a chance for God to show His power. I would love to hear your thoughts about this story in the comments section. What part spoke to your heart the most? And how has it reminded you to trust God in your own battles? If this story spoke to your heart, subscribe to Stories of the Olive for more inspiring Bible stories brought to life. Remember, with God, no giant is too big,